This here is my trusty sourdough starter. I think that gives you a hint as to what today's video is gonna be all about. When I asked y'all if you were interested in a sourdough bread baking video, a few of you in the comments said you would love to see that. So that is what we are doing today. But don't you worry, we are gonna be freeze drying something that I'm super stoked about. Haven't tried, it's gonna be a total experiment, but come along with me for the journey. First things first is we need to feed our starter. I will preface this entire video by just saying everyone has their own way of sourdough and how they make it and the process. There is no 100% right or wrong way to do sourdough. If your method is working for you, keep doing it, awesome. My method works for me. I learned all of this from another YouTube video, and I will link her video in the video description below if you want to see the real pro and how she does it. But I'm just going to show you what I do, and we start off by feeding the starter. The first thing I'm going to do is pour my unfed starter into a dish. So my sourdough starter lives in the fridge. You can leave your sourdough starter on the counter if it is fed about every day, but I don't bake that often, so I keep mine in the fridge and I feed it about every 7 to 10 days. And that's kind of my baking schedule. When I feed my starter, that is when I bake my sourdough loaves. Every time I bake, my recipe gives me 2 loaves. That usually lasts us about 7 to 10 days, and then when we run out, I bake again. So this is my jar just for my mother. We call it the mother starter. And every time I feed, I use a jar for the starter I'm going to use for baking my bread. And I also will be feeding the mother, and this will just go straight back into my fridge after it does its rise. So this here is my hungry starter, also known as sourdough discard. I am going to be using starter to put in here for my bread recipe, and then I'm also gonna be putting starter to feed in my mother jar to just go into the fridge. And then whatever's left over is the discard, and you can either toss it or you can bake with it. There's plenty of things you can do with sourdough discard. I will show you what I have done. I've been saving up my discard for the freeze dryer. I feed close to a 1 to 2 to 2 ratio, which essentially means I am doing 1 part starter, 2 parts water, and 2 parts flour. But I have a certain set of grams that just always works well for me, which I do 40 grams of starter for my bread recipe, 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of water. So that's what I'm gonna do in my first jar. First jar is fed and ready to go. Again, this is 40 grams starter mixed with 100 grams of filtered warmish temperature water. I mix the starter and water together, then add the flour, mix it all up. She's in there. I'm just going to cover it slightly with a lid. You don't ever want to do a airtight seal on your starter while we're trying to get it to rise. It needs to be able to have some air to breathe. Fancy people will put a rubber band around here to see how high their rise gets. I'm just gonna look for a marker or something because maybe I can find a rubber band. We will see, I can be fancy. Okay, before I do that, I'm going to feed my mother jar. And I know this looks crusty and gross. It really doesn't matter if your jar gets crusty. I mean, I will do a full clean on this, maybe once a month or so, but it's fine. So for my mother jar, I just double what I do for my baking jar. So I'm gonna do 80 grams of starter, 200 grams of warm filtered water, 200 grams of flour. Okay, so here is my mother starter. I found some rubber bands. Duh, I'm a girl. I have rubber bands in my house. I was just picturing those rubbery ones, but this will work perfect. So I am just gonna put this at my starter line, and then we will be able to see how high it grows. And we will do the same for this one that I'm going to use for baking my bread. A common question is, what type of flour should you use when baking sourdough bread? you can use different kinds. I, for the longest time, used all-purpose flour. I used a combination of all-purpose flour, whole wheat flour, and bread flour. I now pretty much just only use bread flour. The higher the protein level in your flour, the better sourdough bread you will get. At least that's what I've heard. So I recently just bought a huge thing of bread flour from Costco. People really like the King Arthur brand of bread flour, but you can't really go wrong. But for this video, I am just using all of the Costco Kirkland brand bread flour. Sourdough is a long process, so be warned. You really got to commit to this, but it's so worth it. So I'm sorry if this video ends up being fairly long. I'm going to try to talk through this as fast as I can, but apologize in advance if this is a long video. My 2 jars now need to rise in a warm place. My home here in Alaska is fairly chilly. We're usually around like 68 degrees or so. So my starter takes much longer to rise than it did when we lived in Arizona. So I like to keep this in a warm place. I usually will put it next to my gas fireplace and use that as kind of a warm environment. Or I have a few rooms in my house that if I shut the door when the heat does turn on, it keeps it nice and warm in there. Sometimes I do that. So I'm gonna go stick these by my fireplace, keep it nice and warm, and we will see how long it takes to rise. It probably won't be until later this evening that these are gonna be ready. It's what? It's 11:20 in the morning right now. So I expect this to take several hours, but the amount of time it takes definitely depends on the temperature of your home. So now this is the discard I have left over. What I have been doing with this discard is freezing it in these little silicone ice cube trays. You know what? I think I have enough to be able to top off this tray. I've been saving this because I have been wanting to try freeze drying my sourdough starter. I know you can, I have dehydrated starter before, just I spread it out on parchment. This was when we were moving to Alaska, and just let it completely dehydrate and air dry for over a process of like 2 weeks, I think is how long it took. Then I just sealed it up in a jar for our move because this was traveling to Alaska via truck and trailer, and it was not gonna be refrigerated. So I couldn't keep my starter just in its jar how it normally is. So that's what I did, but I wanted to try to freeze dry and dehydrate my own starter. So that is what we are doing for the freeze drying portion of this video. I have already filled up 2 ice cube trays. This is gonna be enough to try. And then I wanna see if it will come back to life. I don't know. We will get to the freeze drying segment a little later on in the video. Right now, I've got a few errands to run because my kids are finally back in school and I'm a substitute teacher at my kids' elementary school. I work 3 days a week. Today I'm not working. So I have just a few hours to get all of my errands done. After a week of spring break and having fun family in town, we had a blast. I can't believe we're already back to school. I think I needed 2 weeks of spring break. My niece and nephew in Arizona, they're on a modified year-round school schedule and they get 2 weeks for spring break. Here in Alaska, we get 1. What do you guys have for your kids? Do they get 2 weeks of spring break or just 1? Let me know. I will say Alaska would never do 2 weeks of spring break because we want more time off in the summer than we do breaks from school, because summer is a special, amazing, lovely time in Alaska. So we want that to last as long as possible. We will deal with shorter breaks during the school year. My kids are watching The Sandlot in the background, so I'm sorry for any extra noises you might hear, but mom life, right? Before we get my starter, I want to show you how I put together my dry ingredients. For the recipe that I use, that's tried and true for me, that always works, I do 950 grams of bread flour, 650 grams of warm filtered water. If I was a good YouTuber, I would have a beautiful bowl that I make my sourdough bread in, because some people who I watch make sourdough have these gorgeous bowls. Mine is just a plastic junky bowl, but it works. It doesn't matter what you mix it in. But maybe one of these days I will upgrade. But I'm just gonna put my bowl on my food scale. I'm sorry you can't see the numbers, but I am just gonna pour out flour until it says I am at 950 grams. I'm probably gonna need more. Dang it. Okay, refill. My scale shows that my flour is at 950 grams. I am now going to slowly just add my 650 grams of water. So I just zero out my scale and then start adding until my scale tells me I am at 650. Another thing I don't have that most bread makers have is a dough whisk. Right here is where you could use a dough whisk to mix the flour and water together, but I just use a spatula and it's fine. You don't need all the fancy stuff, but the fancy stuff might make it a little more easy. I don't know. I'm gonna get one of these days, but for now, I'm just gonna mix this up. The reason why I do the water and flour first is it just helps your dough, the flour to get fully like moisturized, and I don't know. It's just what the girl did who I saw her tutorial, and so I do it too. I mix the water and flour and let it sit for 30 minutes before I add my starter and salt. Here is what the water and flour dough looks like. It's a little crumbly and stuff still, but I just get it to where it's kind of in one lump and then call it good to go. I'm just gonna cover it with a dampened kitchen towel. I'm gonna let this sit for 30 minutes and then we will go to our next step and do our starter. Here are my two starters. What's interesting is this big one grew a lot more than this one did, but you're looking for it to at least double and get nice and bubbly. This one I am just putting straight into my fridge because this is now my new mother starter. This is what I will use when I go to make bread. In a week or so, my starter will come from this. And I'm going to use all of this starter in my bread recipe. So I don't have to do any weighing or measuring of the starter. I'm just gonna pour it on here. The next step is to add your active starter and salt. I do 20 grams of salt in my recipe. So let's get that going. Here is my dough. I have my the bread and flour mixture, and then the starter I just poured on top along with the salt. Next, I am just going to use my bare hands and mix this all together for at least 5 minutes. That just really helps incorporate the starter into your flour and water. And you just want to make sure you get it kind of just like as smooth as you can. After I mix it, I'm gonna recover it with my towel and let it sit for 30 minutes before we start stretch and folds. I tried to show you at the end of the time lapse how dirty your hands get. Sourdough is a very messy process. I end up with flour everywhere when I am baking. It's just all part of the fun. So here is where my dough is at. The bowl also gets very dirty and dough everywhere. It's fine. It's not going to affect your bread sticking terribly or anything like that. I am now going to cover it for 30 minutes and then come back and do my stretch and folds, which I will demonstrate how that looks. I'm going to stretch and fold every 15 minutes for 1 hour, and then every 30 minutes for at least another hour. So that is going to give me 4 stretch and folds every 15 minutes, and then 2 more stretch and folds after 30 minutes each. And then usually that's where I call it good, and then I let this bulk ferment overnight. I will be back here in 30 minutes. It's time for our first set of stretch and folds. What I like to do is get my hands just ever so slightly damp because the dough just sticks really bad to your hands. So I am essentially just gonna be pulling up the side of the dough and folding it on top of itself. I turn my bowl a quarter turn, pull it up, put it on top of itself, turn, pull it up, put it on top, pull it up, put it on top. I will film this one in real time, and then my next stretch and folds, I will just do like a time-lapse video of it. Oh, sorry, I need to readjust the camera. Okay, hopefully you can see this well enough. I kind of just get my hands in there. I stretch it up and then lay it down. Turn the bowl. Dig my hands under so I can pull it from the bottom. Stretch it up. Fold it down. Quarter turn. Stretch it up. Fold it down. And here is my fourth and final one for this round. It does on your fourth stretch and fold, the dough kind of gets thicker and is a little bit harder to stretch up, but I just do what it lets me do. And then I just leave it like this. I recover the dough, and in 15 minutes, I'm gonna come back and do the same thing. And yeah, you gotta wash your hands in between each one. Okay, y'all, it has been a night. I think with the first day of my kids back to school after being off for 10 days and just having fun with grandma and cousins, the first day back to reality, they got, you know, some emotions going tonight. So I finally got them happy, settled in bed, but it's one of those hard mama nights. I know you parents, I'm sure, can understand that sometimes kids are just emotional and it can be hard. So if you're struggling with a kiddo out there, I feel you, but tomorrow's a new day. 2 of my kids have field trips at school tomorrow, which they are excited for. I am going back to work subbing tomorrow, so I need to get myself in bed so I am well rested for whatever the day brings us tomorrow, and helping my kiddos sleep good and wake up nice and happy. I am going to leave my dough to bulk ferment overnight. Because of the temperature of my house, this does fine sitting on the counter overnight. It will hopefully rise a decent amount. We will then in the morning shape our dough, get them into their banneton baskets, and then I will do a final proofing in the refrigerator and bake my bread tomorrow night. When I say it's a long process, it's a long process. So I will see you guys tomorrow in the morning, and we will see how my beautiful dough is looking. Crossing my fingers, everything is working out, because, you know, of course, the time I decide to film will probably be the time I have a problem, but we will find out. And don't worry, we will get our sourdough starter into the freeze dryer and see how all of that works too. Busy video today. All right, good night. Good morning. We are over here just getting ready for school. You excited? Yes, you are. Okay, be gone. Don't mind my wet hair that I am waiting to dry, and the children in the background, because that's just how it is. Before we start shaping our dough, I want to show you the tools I am using. These are the banneton bowls that the shaped dough will go into for its final rise. And then I use bowl covers, which I got from Amazon. They're so convenient. You just pop it over the top of the banneton and you're good to go. If you don't use these, you can just use a kitchen towel to put over your bowl, but these are just nice, compact, and convenient. So we need that. I also use this. A bench scraper is what this is called, or a bowl scraper. And that's just to help get the dough out of the bowl when I am shaping. We will be using flour on the table to help it not stick. Let's go. My dough did not rise as high as I prefer. I mean, it definitely rose maybe about 30%. We do have a lot of beautiful bubbles, which means that our starter was nice and active. And I'm still just gonna shape it with the way this dough is. It's gonna have about another 6 to 7 hours to proof in the refrigerator for the rest of the day while I am gone at school. So it's gonna be perfectly fine. The thing about sourdough is even if you don't get a perfect rise every time, it's still gonna taste good after you bake it. I've never had a loaf taste bad. Even if it's a little flat, it might be a little more dense, but it still tastes good. So let's get this out of the bowl, onto the counter and start shaping. Here's a cleaning tip. For this bowl, don't wash it right away. I let this dough completely harden and dry, and usually it takes about a day. And then the stuff just peels right off of the bowl and makes it much easier to clean. So I'm gonna show you 2 different ways of shaping dough. First, I'm gonna cut my dough in half, separate it into 2 bowls, I believe is the proper word. And I'm just gonna form my loaves. So I will just show that to you in, let me get a better camera angle. Sorry, I am so not good at this. Okay, so I'm just gonna use my bench scraper to just estimate this in half. And the first one, all I really do is just start kind of turning it until it turns into a ball. And this is a little on the sticky side, so it's kind of sticking bad to my hands. I'm gonna add some more flour to my surface. And you kind of want to push and pull, creating some tension on the outer layer of your dough. And it just kind of forms into this nice, beautiful ball. Isn't she pretty? Okay, there's our first one. I'm just gonna set her there. Method 2 is a great method for if you're gonna be adding inclusions to your sourdough. Like people like to do jalapeno and cheddar. I did a cinnamon sugar sourdough loaf that turned out so good. For these 2 loaves, I am not adding inclusions, but this method still works for shaping dough. You're just kind of trying to spread out the dough into a rectangle. And if you kind of just hold it, it will stretch out. Okay, this is kind of a rectangle. And we are just going to fold over one side. Or first let me show you. If you're gonna do inclusions, you would spread them out here. Fold over one side, add more inclusions. Fold over the other side, add more inclusions. And then we're just gonna kind of roll it together like this. And then you see we kind of have some seams on the side. So that's where we want to kind of use our hands again and just form our lovely ball of dough. You can see they're kind of 2 different sizes. That's okay. I may have just not cut them out perfectly, but the 2 different methods kind of make your balls shaped a little bit differently. I am going to just lightly flour the inside of my bannetons just to prevent anything from sticking. And then all we need to do is flip our dough into our banneton upside down. You can see some of our little bubbles on our dough. This dough is looking amazing. I'm actually not worried about it at all. It's gonna be perfect. This is where these bowl covers come in handy because you can just cover them like so. And they're ready. And like I said before, these are gonna go in the fridge until I get home from school today. which will be about 6 or 7 hours. And then I am going to bake these beauties off, and we will get to eat some fresh sourdough bread tonight for dinner. And it's just my favorite thing. Super excited about that. We also need to get our freeze dryer going tonight. So that will be our plan for the evening. Wish me luck at school. Hope y'all have a great day, even though you're all seeing this in one day. This is a multi-day video. Okay, I will see y'all later tonight for the baking process. Well, I survived my day at school. It was actually a super easy day, and I got to go outside and do some recess duty, and the weather was literally amazing. It was sunny. I think the temperature was like 36 degrees, which probably sounds cold, but it felt so nice. Like, I didn't feel cold at all. I mean, obviously I had my jacket and gloves on, but it was awesome to be out in the sunshine. Our loaves are ready to bake. I pulled these out of the fridge. I bake my loaves. I start at 450 degrees and I preheat my cast iron pots that I will show you in there. I pull them out when they're hot, stick my dough in, put them in. I'm gonna bake them for 18 minutes at 450 with the lids on. I will be removing the lids, turning the heat down to about 425 degrees. Let it bake for another about 18 minutes or so when the top is nice and golden and toasted, and then pull them out, and that is always perfect. So I just recently started baking my sourdough with parchment paper. I wish I had started doing this sooner, because sometimes the bread sticks to the bottom of the pan that it's cooking in. When you put it in parchment paper first, it does not stick and you can lift it right out. So highly recommend doing that. These are my cast iron baking pots that I use for sourdough bread. This one is Lodge brand, which I do think they sell on Amazon, so I will put a link to it. This is my absolute favorite one. It's just the perfect size. This one is Food Network brand. I think it was purchased at Kohl's. This was a wedding gift and it works great too. I just don't love the shape of it as much as the shape of this one, but I always make 2 loaves, and so I'm glad to have both pots. They clearly are well loved, but still going strong. So I'm gonna put these in my oven, let them start preheating before I get my bread in. So you need to score your dough. I'm gonna do like one deep score kind of around the side. I am so not artistic, so let's see if I can make kind of a leaf. Here's how it looks in my bowl. If it's kind of being indented by the parchment paper, I kind of just push it out and like try to flatten it up a little. But I cannot wait to eat these. Okay, that one actually turned out kind of cute. This, I just did random things. These look so good. Let me show you how they turned out. Here is our first loaf. This is the one I tried to do the leaf design on, and I'm just not good at the sourdough art. Here is my other loaf, but it is just so good. And the convenience of doing the parchment paper is that you can just lift the bread out with no problem. Before, I would have to struggle to get the bread out. So definitely use the parchment. I just need to let the bread cool for about 30 minutes before cutting into it, like 30 minutes to an hour, but it's so hard to resist. Just when you cut it straight from the oven, it's really crumbly and just hard to cut. So in a little bit, we will give our bread a taste test. Are you ready to cut into our sourdough? Yeah, let's try. So another reason that shows I'm a terrible YouTuber, I don't have a good bread knife. This is the only like sharp serrated knife that I have, so hopefully next time I make a sourdough video, I've got some nicer looking things. Can you keep your hand away from, that one isn't sharp, sweetie.
How's it not?
But look at that. Doesn't it look delicious? Okay, we're gonna butter it up and see how it tastes. All right, we all got our piece to share. I swear there's nothing better in the world. Get this. Okay, take a bite. Oh yeah. Fluffy. Delicious.
Healthy.
Slight tang.
Welcome to the future. We're gonna live on the moon now.
We do?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me if you like sourdough.
Me!
Alright, say bye. I store my sourdough loaves just in a Ziploc bag and I keep it in the fridge. It lasts better when you keep it in the fridge. And then my other loaf that I have over here, I freeze it. So I just wrap it in plastic wrap and then wrap that in foil, stick it in the freezer. When this loaf runs out, I pull out the next one and it's good to go. We got bread for about a week and then I will bake again. So that concludes my sourdough demonstration. If you liked it, please let me know if you want to see more sourdough videos. I would be happy to do a couple sourdough videos throughout the month just to show you what I'm baking. There are so many different sourdough recipes that I want to try and I could easily bring you guys along with me. I saw someone do a marinara, what am I trying to say? Pepperoni, like a pepperoni pizza sourdough loaf where they did like marinara, cheese, and pepperonis in it, and that looked amazing. I need to try doing like the jalapeno cheddar. I've done the cinnamon roll. What else did I want to do? I wanted to make a pizza crust with sourdough discard. Anyway, I have so many ideas. If that is something you would be interested in, it would help me if you would just let me know in the comments, just so that I know, because it is a little different than freeze drying, which I totally get that a lot of you are here for freeze drying. And don't worry, I am going to start my freeze dryer tomorrow. I'm going to start that in the morning and I will show you how I set up my trays and all of that for my sourdough discard. That's going to be kind of like the second half of this video is going to be my freeze drying the sourdough discard. I'm really stoked about that. Just as a caveat, once it is done and processed, my intention is to get it broken down into like sourdough discard powder. I will see you in the morning for part 2 of our sourdough journey. Okay, I am so sorry. I know I said the freeze drying part would be a part of this video, but it is just too long. So I'm gonna save my freeze dryer footage and post that video on Tuesday. Today, this video is airing on Saturday, so in 2 more days, right? Saturday? 3 more days. I'm gonna post a freeze drying section. I am so sorry, but I just don't wanna lose people in the whole chaos of this sourdough bread and the freeze drying, the sourdough starter. It just got to be too long. I talk too much, so sorry about that. But on Tuesday's video, make sure you watch it and watch till the end because I do have a fun announcement for you guys and might be doing a little giveaway in Tuesday's video. So stay tuned. If you have any questions about the freeze drying bread process, please leave them down in the video description, not the video description, in the comments. Wow, it is late and I should just stop talking. Leave them down below. Happy to help you there if I can. I am still an amateur sourdough baker, even though I've been doing it for a couple years. I am not a professional whatsoever, but I absolutely love it and I like sharing and teaching others how to do it. So on that note, please forgive me for postponing the freeze drying to next video, but I just think it will make everything a lot more smooth and not have to watch the world's longest video. Okay. Bye, y'all.